6 players. That's all it takes for a World Cup to mint a new generation of legends. Every tournament does this, every single time. A handful of names walk in as relative unknowns and walk out as players the entire football world will be talking about for the next decade. The 2026 World Cup is no different, and honestly, it might be doing this faster and more dramatically than any tournament in recent memory. We're talking about an 18-year-old who made Casemiro look a step slow, a 40-year-old goalkeeper having the best week of his career, a teenager who's already outplaying Bruno Guimaraes in the middle of the park. This tournament has been absolutely loaded with these moments, and today we're breaking down 6 players who, by the time this World Cup ends, are going to be immortal in the history of this sport. So who actually deserves that label, and what have they actually done to earn it? Let's get into it. Let's start with a name that's been on every single highlight reel since the opening week, Ayoub Buwadi. 18 years old, playing in his very first World Cup, and in his opening match, he sat in the middle of the park against Brazil and dictated the entire game. Think about that for a second. Brazil's midfield includes Casemiro, a player with multiple Champions League titles and a reputation built on controlling exactly these kinds of matches. And in Buwadi's World Cup debut, he made one of the most decorated midfielders on the planet look like he was playing in slow motion. That wasn't a one-off either. Per the statistics being tracked across this tournament, Buwadi became the only player this century to record both 10 successful dribbles and 10 or more chances created across his first 3 World Cup matches. Add in 26 duels won for his country, a share of the most tackles of any player in the tournament, and 13 possessions won back, and you start to understand why this isn't just a flashy attacking talent. This is a complete midfielder, doing damage in both boxes, at an age where most players are still trying to find a regular spot in their club's starting 11. Here's the interesting part. Morocco's golden generation already had its headline names heading into this tournament. Akram Hakimi running the right flank, Brahim Diaz pulling strings in attack. But what Buwadi is showing the world is that Morocco's depth runs even deeper than anyone realized. Every cycle, this country seems to produce another layer of talent underneath the established stars. And if Buwadi keeps performing at this level deep into the knockout rounds, Morocco's run from a few years ago that ended in a World Cup semi-final might end up looking like the warm-up act. Now let's talk about a story that's the complete opposite end of the career spectrum, because age has been just as fascinating a storyline at this World Cup as youth has. Vozinha, 40 years old, playing in Cape Verde's first ever World Cup match and producing one of the single greatest goalkeeping performances this tournament has seen. Cape Verde, a nation of roughly 500,000 people, walked into their tournament opener against Spain, the second-ranked side in the entire competition, as enormous underdogs, and Vozinha simply refused to be beaten. He faced 27 shots in that match, made 7 saves, 6 of them from inside his own box, and walked off with a scoreless draw against one of the best teams in this World Cup. No goalkeeper has ever played a nation's World Cup debut at a more advanced age, and no goalkeeper at this tournament, arguably, has had a better single afternoon of work. This matters because of what it represents beyond the box score. Cape Verde came into this tournament as the 3rd smallest nation by population to ever qualify for a World Cup. They needed 7 failed qualification attempts before finally breaking through. And in their very first match on this stage, their goalkeeper, a man who's been playing professional football across multiple continents for over 2 decades, delivered the kind of performance that instantly turns a nation's entire World Cup story into something special. In front of him, defenders Dini Borges and Roberto Lopez formed a center-back partnership that matched his composure. But it was Vozinha who made the difference, and his following on social media has reportedly exploded since that match alone. Let's shift to a player who's been must-watch television since the opening whistle of his very first World Cup. Yan Diomande, the Ivory Coast and right-back Leipzig winger, who has been arguably the form player of this entire group stage. His statistical rating through the early rounds sits among the very best in the tournament, and the way he's playing explains why. He operates high and wide, constantly attacking defenders one-on-one. But what separates him from a typical flashy winger is the defensive side of his game. He's been tracking back, winning duels, and contributing at both ends of the pitch in a way that's rare for a player this young. This matters because of the context surrounding it. Ivory Coast made history at this tournament by reaching the knockout stage for the first time ever, and Diomande has been central to that achievement. He's also doing all of this while being one of the most talked about names in the current transfer market, with major European clubs reportedly circling him in the middle of this very tournament. There's something almost cinematic about a player delivering performances this good while simultaneously deciding the next chapter of his club career in real time in front of the entire football world.
Now here's where things get interesting, because not every name on this list needed to wait for this World Cup to already be considered great, but some are using this tournament to climb even higher than anyone thought possible. Lionel Messi has already become this tournament's all-time leading scorer, a 38-year-old still operating on a different plane entirely, with 6 goals in the group stage alone and a player rating that nobody else in this competition has come close to matching. Watching him at this age, still pulling away from every other player statistically tracked at this World Cup, is its own kind of immortality, a living argument for why this sport rewards genius regardless of the calendar. But the bigger issue for this list isn't just about who's already great, it's about who's becoming great in real time, in front of us, during this exact tournament. And that brings us to Yohan Manzambi. The 20-year-old Freiburg midfielder, who was already turning heads during his club's run to a Europa League final, has carried that form directly into his first World Cup with Switzerland. He scored twice off the bench in a 4-1 win over Bosnia and Herzegovina, forced his way into the starting lineup, and then delivered another goal and an assist in a win over co-host Canada that pushed Switzerland through their group. This matters because Switzerland's tournament didn't start smoothly, and it's been Manzambi, more than any established veteran in that squad, who's provided the spark that's turned their campaign around heading into the knockout rounds. Here's the bigger picture worth sitting with. This tournament has been historically loaded with debutant nations and breakout individual talent, and the connection between those two things isn't a coincidence. With this World Cup expanded to 48 teams for the very first time, more countries than ever have a route to this stage, which means more young, hungry talents are getting their first real introduction to the global audience. That's exactly why we've seen teenagers outplaying Ballon d'Or winners and 40-year-old goalkeepers becoming overnight global stories. The bigger the tournament gets, the more opportunities exist for genuinely special moments to happen. The sixth name belongs to a player who's quietly been one of the most statistically dominant performers in this entire competition, without generating the same headline attention as some of his counterparts. Florian Wirtz has been central to everything Germany has tried to build offensively, with a rating among the tournament's best heading into the knockout stage, and his creative influence has shaped multiple matches, even when the results around him haven't always gone Germany's way. What makes his case for this list compelling is the manner in which he operates, constantly finding pockets of space between opposition lines and delivering the exact kind of decisive moments that define which players get remembered once a World Cup ends. Think about it this way. Every single tournament in the history of this competition has produced a handful of names that nobody outside their home country knew before kickoff, and that absolutely everybody knows by the final. That's not an accident of football. That's the entire magic of the World Cup as a stage. It's the one event on this planet that takes a player from total obscurity to global recognition in the span of just a few matches. And 2026 is proving to be one of the richest tournaments for that exact phenomenon in recent memory. What happens next for these 6 players is the part that should really get you excited. The group stage is one thing, but the knockout rounds are where reputations are truly made or broken. A teenager dominating Brazil's midfield in the group stage is impressive. A teenager doing it in a quarterfinal with elimination on the line is the stuff that gets written into football history permanently. The same goes for every name on this list. Vozinha facing a knockout stage penalty shootout, Diomande trying to drag Ivory Coast deeper into a tournament their nation has never experienced before, Manzambi carrying Switzerland against opposition with far more World Cup pedigree than Bosnia or Canada had. This is the part of the tournament where we find out which of these breakout stories are genuinely built to last, and which ones were simply a brilliant three-match flash that fades the moment the stakes get higher. So, here's what we want to know from you. Which of these 6 players do you think ends this World Cup as the single biggest breakout name of the entire tournament? Would you add anyone to this list we left out? And which one of these stories do you think has the best chance of still being talked about 10 years from now, the way we still talk about the legends from World Cups decades in the past? Let me know in the comments, and if you're enjoying this World Cup coverage, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more.